Welcome back to The Price of Business. I am your host, Kevin Price, talking to you about you and your business. I got Brian Spitz here. He's one of my favorite contributors because I love what he brings in terms of unique information, useful, practical information for people in business, for individuals that are interested in investing. His company is awesome. He's a brilliant young entrepreneur. I'm telling you, he's one of these guys that I think eventually all of us are going to be working for one of these days. It's just a question of time. His company is called BigStateHomeBuyers.com. But the great thing about it is you seem like a nice guy to work for. So, I'm not begrudging the fact that someday I'll probably be working for you. I think you'd be a good guy to work for.
I think so.
Yeah. By the way, he has decided to swallow a frog just before the segment began, so we're going to be working with him here on this segment. As a result, though, he's brought a great guest on that I'll go ahead and introduce.
Okay.
And he's with the law offices of David Munson, and he's a Texas probate and estate administration expert, and talks about that, Texas guardianship, planning and wills and trust, and I bet much, much more. David, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me today.
You bet. Early on, you do want to mention David Munson can be found at davidmunsonpc.com. That's davidmunsonpc.com. And, of course, my friend Brian, he is with BigStateHomeBuyers.com. I am going to ask you to lay out the stage for us of what you want to focus for us today here, Brian. We're not going to use you as much as we normally do because of your voice, but kind of lay out what you want to cover.
Sure. Well, at Big State Home Buyers, we focus on buying houses. We pay cash. We close quickly. We also work with investors to help them build their investment portfolios. So we're a full-service company. We help clear title. We clean out the houses if we need to. We do whatever we need to do to make it a really simple experience for the sellers and a really seamless experience for our investment clients. The biggest source of properties for our company is properties that come from estates, and I've actually worked with David on a couple of transactions. And so I think that from my experience, the biggest lesson I've learned in my business is there's nothing more important than having estate planning. Nobody wants to do it, but it can create a huge mess if you don't have it. So today I brought David Munson on because I wanted to find out a little bit of what people should do if they need to sell or buy a house that is with an estate or with someone who's passed away. We can talk about the estate planning and all of that, but really want to focus on the after.
Yeah. David, tell us a little bit about your background and what got you involved in this field.
Well, I finished law school in 2001 from South Texas College of Law. I took the bar. By the grace of God, I passed it. And since then, I've been out and practicing exclusively in the area of probate, estate planning, guardianship, and everything that goes with that. And in doing that, going through and representing clients in different estates, we have the opportunity that when real estate is available, you get it in all different types of conditions. A lot of times, it's the second to have passed away, and so therefore, you really are helping the family members be able to go through the probate process and make sure part of that is having the property transition. Either it's going to go to the heirs, which it does go to the heirs legally, but ultimately. Do the heirs want to either live there or manage it or use it as an investment, or do they want to go ahead and sell that? A lot of times that just depends on whether or not they really would like to be a landlord or not.
Mm-hmm. Brian, you have a question?
Sure. So tell me, what is one of the most common challenges or common misconceptions people have about what happens when they need to sell a house that after someone's passed away?
Well, generally, it's not a common misperception. Generally, one of the biggest problems is that there's just a lack of information. And so what it's normally going to require is a lot of patience on the part of everybody, the seller, the buyer, the title company, anything going forward. It just is going to require some patience. I mean, involved in any of these types of transactions, you're going to have the court, the person appointed by the court to represent the estate. If nobody's been appointed, there's other options in trying to deal with that. You're dealing with a buyer. You're dealing with a seller. And when a lot of times in these situations when you're dealing with the seller, they didn't live in the house. They don't really have any information, and they're doing their best to try to be able to move forward. In dealing with sellers, though, you may not be dealing with just one seller. You may be dealing with 12 sellers. Let's say the beneficiaries of the estate are 12 people, or they had 12 children, or whatever it may be. A lot of times you've got to get everybody on board on the same page, and then additionally you're working with attorneys and anybody else that may be coming up.
How expensive is not being prepared as far as probates, wills, and that type of thing? How big of an impact, both in time and money, can that lack of preparation have?
Well, I mean, there's ways to be creative that may be able to cut down on some of the costs, but generally speaking, if you fail to plan and if you fail to prepare, it's just going to cost more. I mean, honestly, attorneys, they make monies by dealing with problems and issues, and the more problems that there are and the more time they have to spend on the case, the more it's going to cost. I mean, it's unfortunate that's the truth, but it is the truth. Nonetheless, you do want to get with somebody who has some experience in this type of transaction, because they will be able to save you money in the long run, in the sense that they know what questions they ask and they know what papers to look for. They can give advice along the way. They can tell people whether or not, it's a good deal or a bad deal, or the amount of time that it may be expected to take. And that's what we do in the process, is that we communicate with all the parties and do our best to make it, just like Brian said, a clear, simple, seamless transaction. Yeah,
and I would assume that in many cases, when it gets to the point where they didn't prepare for this, and they had one parent already passed away, there's one parent left in the home, and by the time that parent, either passes away or has to move into, a facility or something, man, I bet they're just trying to get this thing behind them. The kids typically are. Talk a little bit about that. And obviously that planning helps make them get them behind them quicker.
Yeah, that's definitely true. If you have different things in place, whether it's while a loved one is alive and they go into some sort of long-term care facility, if you have powers of attorney in place, it makes this transaction, this transfer of property from when you go to sell it, it makes it a lot easier. And if you have a will or a trust in place, once somebody has passed away, it'll make the transaction also a lot simpler, a lot cleaner, and a lot smoother. If you don't have these things in place, there's a lot of barriers to overcome in your attempt to try to get this property sold. Nonetheless, generally speaking, the loved ones of the family members, I mean, they're tired. I mean, they're trying to care for somebody, or they're trying to deal with an emotional experience of having a loved one pass away, and they really do want some closure on these different types of things. So the harder that you make it on them, the more stressful, the more time they have to put on in getting closure and dealing with their feelings about whatever traumatic event that occurred. And so preparing is definitely the best way to go.
All right. Brian Spitz, he's with Big State Home Buyers. That's BigStateHomebuyers.com. We missed you a little bit in this interview because of your voice. Yeah. Next time, bring your voice.
There's one thing I wanted to add that is one of the most common misconceptions I just thought of, is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but once somebody's passed away, a revocable power of attorney is no longer valid. So a lot of people come to us thinking, well, I have power of attorney over my deceased loved one, but what my understanding is that once someone's passed away and they can no longer revoke the power of attorney, it's not valid.
Right.
So I just thought that's is that correct?
That is correct. I mean, once a person passes away, the powers of attorneys are no longer valid.
Right. Brian Spitz, BigStateHomebuyers.com, and then our his guest today, David Munson, and he's with DavidMunsonPC.com. Thanks to both of you gentlemen. Glad to have you on. All right, when we come back, much more for you. I do want to remind you, best content here shows up over there at USDailyReview.com, and this is The Price of Business.